Welcome everyone, my name is Brett Drummond. I am an MS researcher, science communicator, and one of the co-founders of MStranslate. And so I want to start today with a statement. I'm then going to talk about that statement in relation to myself. And then I'm going to talk about how I think it is now becoming key mindset across multiple aspects of the management of multiple sclerosis. So the statement is that it's easier to keep something rather than recover it after it's lost. Let me say that again. It's easier to keep something rather than recover it after it's lost. And so I actually heard a statement along those lines while I was doing a run recently. So I like to run relatively regularly. And when I run, I have a guided run that I listen to while I go, where a coach is talking to me about different statements. And some of those have statements that are meant to help both with your running and with your mental health as you keep going. Messages to help with your running and messages to help with your life. And there was a statement around that. And I can say that it is very true when it comes to running. If I'm running consistently, it's much easier to keep my fitness. I find run after run after run is a lot easier. It's easy to maintain fitness when you're doing it like that. However, trying to get fitness back, if you have a period without running, as I've had over the past couple of years due to injuries, due to a loss of motivation, due to lockdowns that we experienced during COVID, it's much, much harder to get that fitness back after you've lost it. So I could completely relate to that statement that was made while I was running and relate it back to my own experiences there. But it got me thinking about aspects of multiple sclerosis and how that statement is really becoming true in lots of areas. And there's three main areas in particular that I want to talk about. And the first one is around mental health, and it relates to something that we talked about on our Facebook page earlier this week, which was a study coming out of the University of Reading where they were looking at a relatively large cohort of people living with multiple sclerosis and really just asking them and surveying them about their thoughts on professional psychological support. How many of them wanted it? How many of them actually accessed it? And if they wanted it but didn't access it, what were the reasons for that? And so we can talk about that in more detail. If you want me to do a video on that study, please comment below. But I just want to focus on one of the conclusions that the authors made in this paper. And their conclusion was that we need to start thinking about using professional psychological support for people living with multiple sclerosis to maintain mental health well-being, rather than just seeing as it's something that we access when there's a mental health crisis. So again, using it to maintain mental health well-being rather than just in a response to a mental health crisis. Really relates back to that initial statement, doesn't it? It's easier to keep something rather than try and get it back after it's lost. So if we can maintain mental health well-being by looking after it constantly, that's a much better approach than just trying to get that mental health well-being back after there's been something that's caused it to be lost. So mental health, I think, is one aspect where that statement applies. Physical health is another aspect. And this came back to a talk that I heard at ECTRIMS in Amsterdam last year, where they started talking about the notion of prehabilitation rather than rehabilitation. There has been an acceptance for a long time in the multiple sclerosis research world that exercise forms an important part of the management of multiple sclerosis. However, often it has been seen to be used in a rehabilitative sense. So as mobility starts to get lost, as there's an increase in spasticity as a symptom that people might experience, that's when it starts being implemented or maybe we should try aquatic therapy. Maybe you should look at physiotherapy. Instead, there's now this shift of making sure that when a person is diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, that exercise is implemented almost immediately, prehabilitation. And for exactly that same reason, it's much easier to keep something than to recover it after it's lost. I think that statement applies again and again. There's been a shift in the mindset in terms of how people are thinking about this, in terms of exercise and multiple sclerosis. And lastly, I would say that the statement also applies in terms of how we're now thinking about the use of treatments and disease-modifying therapies in multiple sclerosis. So there has been two schools of thought for quite a while around this, and these are the induction and the escalation therapies. And probably traditionally, escalation approach has been the one that's been used. So start people on a lower efficacy therapy, less side effects, a milder drug, and then if that fails to contain the disease progress, then start to escalate up to more powerful and powerful drugs. However, what research has showed us more recently is that actually an induction approach, that is putting people onto a highly effective therapy as early as possible in their disease course, has long-term benefits. And so again, I think that really relates back to, instead of waiting until we start to lose something to use these highly effective therapies, it seems better to try and maintain and keep the good health that we might get from using a highly effective therapy early, as long as possible. It's easier to keep something than recover it after it's lost. And we know in terms of therapies that actually it's really difficult to recover. We know that myelin repair isn't something that really happens after a while in multiple sclerosis. And this is where remyelination therapies are going to enter into the picture. And we're all really hopeful about that. So I just want you to think about that phrase. It's easier to keep something rather than recover it after it's lost. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. I've covered 3 aspects of multiple sclerosis and how I think we're thinking about them from a research and medical perspective, in terms of things that I'm seeing in the literature and things that I'm hearing at the conference. But how can you apply it to your own life? What situations do you have where maybe you've found the same thing, or maybe you've had to go through the opposite? Maybe it's only been something that you've applied after the fact, after you've started to lose something. And did you find that easier or harder? Love to hear your thoughts. So please do comment below. I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's a bit of a different video, but if you'd like me to do more content like this, comment below with that as well. And we'll look forward to doing more videos along these lines. Thanks, everyone.